You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
You know, if you really think about it, we've gone from the smallest government in world history to the largest government in world history in a shockingly short amount of time. And during this short time, we've seen individual freedom and civil liberties decimated in the wake of the state's never-ending quest for more and more control. Democrats, Republicans, both are to blame. This show isn't about picking sides. It's about returning power to its rightful owner, the individual. Welcome to Freedom Strips on the We Are Libertarians Network. Well, hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of Freedom Strips. I'm back. I'm alive. We're back on the air. I've got Matt Bell in the virtual studio with me here.
That's right.
Yes. So I took a hiatus for a couple months. I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with the show. I was like, I want to do something new. We did pretty well. So I took a break trying to decide, come up with some different ideas. A lot has happened. We're going through a global pandemic. Kobe Bryant died. We're spending trillions of dollars, and we're only 3 or 4 months, 4 months into the year now. 2020 has been a roller coaster. We're not even halfway through. But exciting news, as you may hear in the new intro, I got picked up by the We Are Libertarians Network, which was pretty neat. So Chris Spangle contacted me. He's the head of the We Are Libertarians Network, and he said, hey, would you be interested in kind of doing like a little partnership? We can help you get more people listening to your show. Also, we're trying to expand our network, and we'd just love to have you on. It's not like a huge partnership, but I was more than happy to join them and have their help in expanding the show. So thank you to them. If you haven't listened to them yet, go ahead and check out the We Are Libertarians podcast. They got a bunch of different shows connected to them. They're a great group over there. But let's go ahead and dive in to our topics here. So Matt, first thing obviously we got to talk about is coronavirus. What are you seeing in your neck of the woods with all this mess?
First of all, it's impossible to hear the words coronavirus without me hearing Cardi B in my head. Coronavirus! Yeah. I'll literally be running some days, and it's like every time somebody coughs in public now, I'm like, coronavirus! It's just,
that's an unfortunate tick that you have in your head now.
I know. The most uncomfortable I've been in a very long time. I went to Lowe's the other day. I broke quarantine because there's only so many things you can do at the house. Lowe's is supposed to be essential because it's got plumbing and whatnot. So they made it an essential business. So I was like, I'm going to build a shed. I'm going to build a shed in my yard. And so I go out and I'm in the line, and there's like this waiting. There's only so many people that they allow into Lowe's, and the police are out front, like policing how many people can go into the store. And so they're only letting so many people in. I finally get to like the very front, and dude, I got to sneeze so bad or cough. And all I could think, dude, I had a mask on, and all I could think was I'm about to blow snot into this mask. And I don't think it's coronavirus. I think it's allergies, but I don't want to do it. And so I was doing everything in my power not to sneeze. And I looked like I was having a seizure because like I was outside, and every time I would look at the sun, it was like, oh no, hold it. And it just would burn your nose. And I was thinking to myself, man, I remember the times when you could just cough in public and everyone would be like, no big deal. But now it's like you cough in public and everyone's like, coronavirus.
People draw guns on you in public and start sneezing around you.
You get out of here, sir.
No, this is a terrible point in time where with people that have bad allergies are having a rough time.
Oh my gosh!
This.
Well, it's middle Georgia. It is so bad. Like it's the worst place I've ever lived as far as allergies go. I mean, the pine trees. That's moonlight through the pine. It's like we got the pine trees, brother.
Oh yeah.
And those things throw some yellow pollen. That, I mean, there's a month and a half here where it's absurd. Like you can like cars look like they've got yellow snow on
Yeah.
it, and it's just pollen. So anyways, I guess that's the anecdotal story to tell you, like, I'm alive, like we're hanging in there. We had some cases in South Georgia. We've got some cases here in Middle Georgia, but I think the big ones were down in Albany, and somebody had a funeral or something going on, and they decided to all get sweaty and dance and drink and have something like that. It was some festival of sorts, and so a lot of people got it. And my biggest fear is always, and this is going to sound super libertarian, but my biggest fear is always like, oh no, what's the government going to do? Like, and especially being, a business owner, your biggest fear is I can handle threats that are outside of your business, but once there's an entity that can get inside of your business and reach into your pockets, then it's you fear that, because coronavirus can have an impact for sure, but the government legislating things can have a much larger impact. And so it's been fine, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it everybody's mostly afraid. If coronavirus is for me personally, and this isn't me belittling suffering in New York or New Orleans and things like that, but for me personally, I would say on a suffering scale, it's been a 2 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really hasn't been anything, and 2 is only because I can't go to restaurants. So like that's not a real problem. That's just whatever. But fear's been like an 8 or 9 out of 10 because everybody is freaking out, and this is going to be a wildly unpopular opinion, but I hate seeing people post on social media about how I should stay inside.
Yeah,
and I don't mean me. They don't say me personally, but it's like. Oh, here's an open letter from an ICU nurse. And I'm like, listen, if I'm not going to listen to the Surgeon General, I'm definitely not going to listen to an ICU nurse from Birmingham.
Well,
I don't know.
I've been kind of going through the same thing here. Like I've been blessed enough to still have a job, still collect a paycheck. And I get that like a lot of people, the unemployment numbers are unbelievable. They just released new numbers a couple of days ago where it was upwards of over 10 million applying for unemployment insurance. That's just unemployment insurance. They said the actual total unemployment number is much higher, possibly closer to 20 to over 20 million of the actual unemployment numbers. This unbelievable economic collapse that we've had from this thing is something that has never happened in the history of especially the United States. I don't know if anything like this has ever happened in the history of the world. Well, it hasn't really. It really hasn't. Not to this level. There's never been an economic collapse quite like this. Now this COVID-19, I think it's beneficial for us to look at the latest numbers. I got the John Hopkins Coronavirus Research Center here. With the latest numbers. So the total confirmed cases in the world right now is at 1.8 million, almost 1.9. So we got 1.9 million across the world now, 568,000 in the United States. That far exceeds all of the other numbers, except a little asterisk next to China, because those people are not reporting the right numbers.
They reported 0.
Yeah, they were reporting 0 new cases in China, which
0.
People like I've seen like New York Times, all the different media outlets saying that the U.S. far exceeds all other case numbers in the world, and China's now reporting 0 new cases. I'm just like, well, you're being a blatant mouthpiece to the Chinese Communist Party. You actually believe that China has 0 new cases? Dude, after they were silencing whistleblowers when this thing first started to get out, they first discovered this thing in December, and they started having whistleblowers start to blow the whistle on this virus. And these guys, we don't know where they go. We don't know if they're dead or just being held in a prison, but they just disappear, like these doctors.
Oh, they're dead.
Yeah, these doctors are gone. These original whistleblowers. And then China starts to say, well, yes, we have this virus, but it's not human-human transmission. So there's nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Taiwan is like, no, this thing is human-human transmission. We've got proof that this is real. And it's just been a huge just cluster. So, like as I said, 1.9 million confirmed cases in the world, 570,000 in the United States. Far and away, the most cases, the kind of epicenter in the United States has been New York. I know the last I've heard that they're trending down, which is good. It's a lot of their initial expectations of this thing and the numbers coming out and the different graphs and charts were saying that, boy, New York was going to be really hit hard. The hospitals were going to get flooded. And to an extent they have been, but from recent reports, I've seen that they're actually doing fairly well.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Well, it was nice to see. It was nice to see that no one in America has died from coronavirus for lack of care. Like no one has they have not had to ration anything. It's almost like our healthcare system is pretty okay.
It's definitely better. Well, and that's another topic that's like, the likes of like Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Socialists were kind of pushing this, saying like, look, this is a reason why we would need universal health care, is because one, the government, there is one truth that the government completely flopped on the testing, and the CDC and the WHO completely flopped on their recommendations. I mean, you and I were talking before the show about how the CDC and WHO and the FDA all completely flopped on this. The CDC saying that, recommending that people don't wear masks, they don't do anything, when every scientific study out there says that, I mean, you could wrap a t-shirt around your face. It's not going to be a perfect protection, but it does something. It
Right.
stops some droplets from getting in. And now they've completely flip-flopped. Now the CDC says, yes, masks do work and you should wear a mask if you go outside. But right here, I've got a Reason article. This says the CDC and the FDA wrecked the economy. It says public officials across the United States are flying blind against the COVID-19 epidemic because of a government-engineered testing fiasco that they do not know how fast the virus is spreading, how many people were infected by it, and how many will die as a result, or how many have developed immunity to it. The failure to implement early and wide testing, which caused by a combination of short-sightedness, ineptitude, and bureaucratic negligence, left politicians scrambling to avoid a hospital crisis by imposing broad business closure and stay-at-home orders. The initial outbreak of COVID-19 in Wuhan, China was reported at the end of December, and the first case in the United States was reported on January 20th, by which time it seems likely that many other Americans were already infected. At first, the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention monopolized COVID-19 tests, and when the CDC began shipping tests to state laboratories in early February, they turned out to be defective. So this is the whole thing, is like,
Jeez.
They sent out millions of tests, and these tests were bunk. They didn't work.
Right. Well, how many false positives did they get? That was the thing. Like,
yeah, that
20%?
number I haven't been able to find, because they sent out all these tests and then they had to tell them to return the test because they had to redo the test and fix it. Meanwhile, they completely locked it down to where private labs could not assess, like they couldn't have access to the scientific studies developed to see how far the virus had progressed and to develop testing kits. So the FDA and the CDC completely blocked all of those or the ability to develop new test kits. And the only reason why cities started to test on their own, Seattle was the first city to develop its own tests. And it's because they went rogue. They completely ignored the CDC and FDA regulations and guidelines. And they just said, we're just going to develop the test kits and start testing people.
We're doing it anyway.
We're breaking the red tape.
It's crazy because, you think about the CDC, the WHO, and it's like, you have one job, and that is to make sure that we don't have a global pandemic.
The World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control.
Yeah, like you did not control that disease very well, and you did not keep the world healthy. Like, if that doesn't, it's crazy to me. And that was one of the things, like my frustration, I guess, with Joe Rogan. And he even says, I'm not a politician. I don't follow that stuff. But when they asked him, why he likes Bernie, and he said, because he's consistent. And I was like, that is not a good reason.
You can be consistently bad at something. Like
you can be consistently wrong. Like, and I don't know, that was frustrating, but it's the idea that this is a perfect example of why we need more control. We need single payer. Like, how did that work in Northern Italy? Did single payer, did it save them? And it's like, how did these things work? One of the things I'm interested to see is how it changes our manufacturing, like our shipping lanes and all that stuff, and how we, instead of making everything in China, it's like maybe we should make some in Canada, some in the United States, and some in China. And that way, if something happens, you can shut down Chinese factories and not destroy the world economy.
Right.
It's interesting, but when I think about like the CDC, and honestly, this is one of the things that I do, like the whole good Trump, bad Trump thing. Like, one of the things that I really, really do like about Trump is the fact that now he's like, something's wrong at the WHO.
Mm-hmm.
Like something's really wrong there. We're going to take a look at it because we do a lot of funding, and it's like, yeah, they wouldn't even acknowledge the existence of Taiwan.
I was going to ask if you saw that video.
That was crazy.
So
it was insane.
For those that don't know, you can look up the video on your own. You can just like Google search WHO official ignores Taiwan question. But it was this journalist on Skype, and she asked if they would reassess Taiwan joining the World Health Organization and being represented in the organization. And
he was like, "Oh, I can't hear you. The connection's bad."
He was like, I didn't hear your question. After a long pause, she waited. She was like, hello? And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear your question. She goes, oh, no problem. I'll just repeat it. And he goes, no, we'll go on to another one.
No,
and she goes, no, I actually did want to ask you about Taiwan. And he hangs up on Skype. He hangs up.
Yeah. Dude, what the crap? Can you imagine if like you and your wife were in an argument and had a conversation, and she says something to you, and you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you." And she's like, "What I said was like, no, let's move on."
Next question.
Yeah, I'm not interested in this conversation at all.
So,
but
it's wild, and for those that don't understand like the meaning behind that, like why is Taiwan asking to be recognized by the World Health Organization? Well, China doesn't recognize Taiwan as a nation, as a country. So, and the World Health Organization has had many ties to the Chinese government. A lot of influence and money comes from the Chinese government. And so they've been a mouthpiece.
Did you hear about why?
What's that?
So I didn't know the Belt Road Initiative.
No.
So you know what I'm talking about? I think it's called Belt and Road Initiative for China. It's like their big push. One of the things that they're doing is they're providing 5G, stolen technology, but they're taking it to and offering it to these different countries at discounted prices, or saying, like, for example, when I was in Mozambique, one of the things that they did with Mozambique is they stopped giving them cash, and they started trading and building plants in Mozambique, but trading them with infrastructure. And saying, like, instead of $5 million, we'll give you $5 million worth of roads, or we'll give you $5 million worth of internet connections.
Okay, I know what you're talking about now. Yeah.
Okay, and so they're helping these nations that are third world nations to develop. So the World Health Organization, the main guy, the leader, whatever this dude's name is, he's from Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
China has unbelievable investments in Ethiopia. And so it's not, they were saying that it may not be that, he's bought off specifically, but he's under immense pressure to satisfy the Chinese, because if they pull their investments, the Ethiopian economy will collapse.
Right. The Ethiopian economy will collapse. And I believe I'd just be talking out of my ass here, but I think that China can seize the land that they've, like if they default over, it's not just like, hey, you owe us a bunch of money. I believe they can seize land as well in those types of deals.
Yeah, they hate it. A lot of the people in Mozambique, thought they were going to get the jobs of a lot of these plants, and it ended up being people from China. And there's a lot of animosity, and I don't think people realize, like, this is like a thing that a lot of people don't talk about, is how racist China is against black people.
Yeah.
Like, it's a thing.
It is.
And it's one of the reasons, like, Hollywood they don't like to put in their big blockbuster action movies, they don't like a black lead because it doesn't do well in the Asian market. It doesn't do well in China. And have you seen that video where they're keeping black people out of the McDonald's in China?
Yes, I actually saw that.
Dude, what in the world?
That is insane. It is insane.
And the thing is, can you imagine if there was imagine if there was, let's say, a Starbucks that asked somebody to either buy something or leave. Like, oh, that would be a huge racist deal. Can you imagine if somebody stood at the front and was like, here's a sign that says no black people because we think you carry the virus?
Yeah, right.
Like, what?
I know.
Like, nobody wants to talk about some of the craziness that comes out of China is, I mean, it's bananas, man.
It is. It's really, really wild. Of course, I mean, I've heard reports of even people, crazy people here in the States, like being racist against Chinese Americans, just because they look Chinese or like they associate them with the virus and different things like that. So, I mean, it's just crazy all around, but the Chinese,
I've not seen that, but I've heard it. I heard it parroted on the news. I've never seen anybody.
Right.
And the idea that somebody, I don't know, for somebody to be that dumb, to be like, oh, you're Chinese, you're responsible.
Oh, I absolutely believe that people are that, there's a group of people out there that are that dumb.
It's great. Like, no, they are here. They live in the same city you do, doing the same things you do.
I'm from Los Angeles. Like, what?
Yeah. I'm from Macon, Georgia, man. Like, right. Oh, man. There was a thing that, I'm trying to remember who was talking about it, but they were saying, like, a lot of these, like, Chinese restaurants and, Japanese steakhouses are owned by Koreans.
Huh.
they were like, you're being racist against the wrong people anyways. Right. They're like, the most entrepreneurial people when it comes to Asians are Koreans. Yeah. And they're like, all these Asian steakhouses, like all these like Chinese steakhouses or Japanese steakhouses and Chinese places are like, man, that Chin's Wok is owned by a Korean. Yeah. And you're like, oh. So it's like, at the end of the day, God, we don't know anything anyways. Like, to be racist against somebody, it's like they did that little DNA profile in Central Park, and where Ancestry picked 100 people, and they asked them to pair up with people who they thought were most like themselves. And then they gave them DNA tests and were like, actually, you're more like this person. You share more ancestry with this person. And it's like, it's so stupid to look at somebody's complexion or skin tone or facial features and be like, oh, you're this. Yeah. It's like,
right.
You have no idea.
Yeah, like I saw AOC tweet out about how the black population in America have been affected to a greater extent than any other minority. And so it was like, it was such the like typical response. Like, you look at something like a global pandemic and you find the needle in the haystack of you're just searching for any kind of racism that you can find. But it was, I saw Michael Malice reply to her and he was like, what about the yellow population? He's like, I think it's disproportionately affecting, I don't know, the Chinese.
Dude, I love Michael Malice.
Yeah, he's great, and he just pokes fun at the fact that, like, look, you're using racism to try and force some sort of agenda down people's throats, and it's just like you ignore Asian racism, like with like the Harvard admissions into college, like they completely discriminate against Asians, but they never bring that up.
As Thomas Sowell would say, the bigotry of soft bigotry of lower expectations. That's what it is. Basically saying like, oh, they need help getting into college, and like, oh, we should penalize the Asians because they're too smart. And it's like, this is the soft bigotry of low expectations, saying like, well, we're not really expecting a whole lot out of you. So when you do okay, if you get within 400 of an Asian, we're going to give you the same test score. It's like that's still racism. Like, that's
very much.
It's not full racism. It's definitely bigotry of some sort. But
yes,
I think do you remember 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when we started saying things like, man, the media is just a puppet for the liberal agenda or this or that. They're dishonest or this or that. And it's like, I remember when they photoshopped George W. Bush out of that magazine. And like, that was the first time I remember thinking, whoa, that's crazy. Like you can't do that. Like you can't take a picture and like edit people out and then call it fact.
Right.
And that was like my first real, oh wow, that's crazy. I feel like since the virus situation, it's like the masks are just off.
Yeah.
Like it's so like now at this point we don't even like one of the things that I like that Shapiro said is if you think that Trump was the executioner of civility, he was actually the coroner.
Yeah.
He showed up.
Right.
It was already dead.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the idea that we were all getting along and whatnot. And so for him to come out and be like, oh, this is fake. You guys are bad news. You guys are, you know, asking incendiary questions for incendiary purposes. Mm-hmm. It's like you watch these press briefings and the one person that asked them the question, the easy question, and then the other people wrote and said, how did you help solve COVID-19 today? How did your question help solve COVID-19? Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
In that press conference, that one reporter asked like a softball question, and then afterwards, their peers were like, "How dare you?"
Right.
You know, and it's like, man, at this point, it's just, I don't know where it goes, but it's crazy because now when you hear from a source anything, I mean, literally anything, like masks help, masks don't help.
Right.
You're like, who said that? And I always think about the story. My grandfather, like this man's dog, he bit somebody, and he hurt this kid. And the owner of the dog said to my grandfather, he didn't mean to. He just got scared. And my grandfather said, did the dog tell you that?
Right.
And I'm like, yeah. And so now it's one of those questions of, did the internet tell you that? Did CNN tell you that? Did MSNBC tell you that? Did Fox News tell you that? Like, where did you hear that from?
Right.
And it's all fun and games. It's funny to watch, you know, Trump, you know, trash CNN. It's okay to watch CNN, you know, Don Lemon loses marbles on CNN talking about how he's this or frustrated. But once a pandemic hits, we really need a spot that's like, hey, here's news. Like, actually, here's what you need to know. Like, let's forget all the other stuff. And we don't have it. And you can kind of see us as Americans kind of being like, what's the right thing to do? How far is social distancing? Is a mask helping? Should we quarantine? Should we not? Am I being lied to? When the CDC tells me you need to socially distance yourself or 200,000 people are going to die, and they're going to die anyways, anywhere from 100,000 to 200,000. And then a week later be like, oh, maybe 90,000. And then 4 days later be like, oh, 80, oh, 60, oh.
Yeah.
And it's like, and masks help.
And by the way,
like, oh yeah, and this. And you're like, what are you supposed to do as a normal, non-hateful American person who just wants to live your life and do your job and have enough money to go on vacation and like just be a person? Yeah. It's like, what outlet do you have? Who do you look to tell you the truth? Because at this point, does it even exist?
Well, you have to. You can't really look to anyone to tell you the truth. You have to try and do your best to find it yourself. Make an educated guess on like different, because who's to say that the numbers that are being provided are even accurate? And that's the thing about all these models with this COVID-19 is they're all guesstimates. Like they don't know, and none of the models go into the fall. That's the other thing is like they have no idea what happens after September. No idea. And I mean, they have no idea. They have no idea what happens tomorrow, much less after September in the fall. Like, does this thing start to slow down, which by all the numbers and projections are saying that it will slow down, but it may come back in the fall. And these types of viruses have a nasty way of surviving and mutating. So who's to say, like, we probably have a different strain in the fall. And that's the thing about this economic lockdown is like, when do people get to go back to work? When do you make it legal for people to try and survive by going back to work and earning money? It's like, if this thing is going to come back in the fall anyway, what have you done? What have you accomplished? You've accomplished virtually nothing.
Yeah, that's the point where when people are like blasting each other on Facebook, like, guys, no one's taking this serious, and I am. And I'm like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm just saying, are you aware that we may socially isolate? We may wreck the economy. We may drop 30, 40% in the stock market. We may lose, have 30 million people on unemployment. And the reality is everybody gets it anyway.
Yeah.
Like right now, our healthcare facilities are not overrun. They're strained, but they're not,
And to an extent, I'm sure the social distancing has helped with that, with the spread and everything. But you're absolutely right, is we have no metric for success. It's just like we don't really, there's no real way to know what the correct course of action is because we've never gone through anything like this. And we don't know. We're like, hey, if we didn't shut everything down and we didn't implement social distancing, numbers may have skyrocketed and things may have been overrun. We don't know. But what we do know is the results of the actions we have taken now. I mean, unemployment is skyrocketing, and people that argue that's like, hey, these social distancing laws and making it illegal for you to go outside and to go enjoy yourself and your life and go work is just like, what those are there in place to save lives when, unemployment has a very close correlation with suicide rates. As the unemployment rate goes up, so do the suicides. So that's another thing is like you're affecting lives either way.
It feels like we made a decision pretty quick. Like you said, we weren't ready. We didn't do testing before. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, like you control diseases, was so far off base on this that literally they're like meteorologists at this point. They're like your local meteorologist that's like, we have a 65% chance of rain tomorrow, and guess what? It doesn't rain.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, that's because this happened.
Right.
And it's like, when Fauci gets up and this is the head of the Center of Disease Control. Like he is the person. And he says, with social distancing measures, we should expect to see around 100,000 people dead by August. By 100,000 to 250. And we're like, 250,000 people are going to be dead in the United States from this disease. In a few months. Holy crap. And then they come back literally 7 days later and they're like, oh, by the way, we think it's going to be we think it's going to be 90,000. Yeah. And that was like the ventilators. They thought they were going to need something like 90,000 ventilators, and then it turned into 20,000. And I'm just like, dude, y'all had no idea. And it turns out if we don't hit at least 50,000, and I'm not saying I want us to, I'm saying that if we don't, and it's less deaths than the flu, there's going to be a lot of people asking a lot of really hard questions like, what the crap just happened and why did it happen? Yeah. And if every leader from the WHO keeps their job, that organization is a farce. And one of the things that you were saying is it's really hard because you can't possibly know the counterfactual of had we not done anything, what would have happened. Sweden is probably the only one that we really have kind of a control to where they told their elderly, y'all stay inside and everybody else go get it. They've seen spikes, but we don't really know what it's going to look like yet. And the reality is we might have done all this for nothing.
Well, maybe. And there has to, this has been my position is, look, we needed to do something. Obviously, we can't just let this thing run rampant. You got to take measures to try and slow or prevent this thing from expanding at a faster rate. But there's got to be a better way than a nuclear option, a sledgehammer effort to just completely take the economy and bust it into pieces and completely take things to a grinding halt to where we are seeing levels of unemployment that we have never seen before, the world has never seen before, and certainly our country has never seen before. And the economic, we don't know what the consequences of these actions are going to be yet. We have no idea. I mean, the Fed is loaning trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to the banks every day to try and keep things afloat. And I mean, Trump orders this new 2.2, well, it was new, it's fairly old now, the $2.2 trillion stimulus package. That's just the one of many that are coming. And the thing about this, let me just rant on this $2.2 trillion spending package for a second. $300 billion of that, only $300 billion goes to the stimulus checks. So a measly $1,200. That's like the, I believe Thomas Massey said it was the cheese in the trap is what they offered you to shut up and take your money. Don't look at what else all these, other large companies that were bailing out, giving money to the bankers, giving money to the airlines, all these different companies that were bailing out. Don't just look the other way. It's unbelievable that they can claim that, and every U.S. senator and congresswoman and man voted to have that passed. It's AOC, Bernie Sanders, all the ones that are against big corporate bailouts, they voted for they voted for it. So they have no grounds to stand and complain about this type of spending package when you vote on it. But it's just unbelievable that $2.2 trillion, we're bailing out banks again. We're bailing out industry, just like 2008, except much worse than 2008.
My only difference with that is in 2008, it was self-made, like the banks did it. They did it to themselves. Now, granted, the government was making them do subprime loans and stuff, but the banks kind of they created their own fiasco. Like the government had its hand in it, but the banks made it a thing. Everybody was kind of chugging along. Like there were no major, now maybe manufacturing and trade being centralized in China, with China being a bad player. Okay. That was maybe always going to have some issues. Maybe some reckoning was coming with that. So, okay, I can get down with that. But as far as when the government comes along and wrecks the economy, I don't see it as a bailout in the sense that it's not like, well, you did it. So you're not bailing me out of something that I did. You're literally trying to fix something that you did. Like the government came along and said, you cannot go to work. The government came along and said, you can't paddleboard on the Santa Monica Pier by yourself. They're the ones that came along and said that. So they are kind of responsible.
It is twofold. To a degree, it is twofold because yes, the government did take the economy to a grinding halt, and it was the Fed policy for these they reward these big banks and these big companies to operate on a debt type of business infrastructure. So it's all about leveraging debt and going into debt and kind of leveraging that to your advantage. And these companies had zero savings at all. Like no company that got bailed out was able to, like a week after the economy went to a grinding halt, they said, we're not going to make it. You got to bail us out. And this is exactly what they did in 2008. It was like, they're operating on the same business model as they were before. It's because they're incentivized to do so, because if they can take their money, make enormous profits, set nothing aside, operate on this debt-based business model, and then when they come to a crashing fall, the government goes and gives them trillions of dollars to bail them out. And then all these CEOs and all the big businesses get this huge pay raise and then this huge cash influx from the government. Doesn't make money, by the way. The government creates nothing. It takes what it gives away. So it's all taxpayer money. So we're paying for these bailouts for these airlines. And it's just like, what right do the airplanes are not going away? I believe it was Peter Schiff that said this. Let the airlines go out of business. The airplanes don't disappear. What happens is some other investor comes up, buys up the assets, operates it in a cleaner, better way to make sure that he doesn't end up like the last guy.
Exactly.
And operates a more effective business model. So
I don't think most people understand, because I didn't. I'm not a smart person. I just try to pay attention to a little bit, but I don't think most people understand how bankruptcy works. Like when Boeing or when Delta goes under, it's not like they just take the planes and burn them.
Right.
Like somebody's going to show up and say, hey, you owe $2 billion in debt. You can't pay it. I'm going to settle it for $1.4 billion. Now I own Delta. Now I need to make sure that this doesn't happen to me.
Right.
And I'm going to make a lot of money with this situation. So you're right. I think that bankruptcy is almost a too big to fail type situation where they're terrified of what happens if they do let them fail. But why not, man? See what happens.
It's just they're getting us more and more into a mess, and so like we've had trillions of taxpayer dollars go into the pockets of government officials. Like, of course, I'm sure you've seen all the like little line items, like the $25 million going to the Kennedy Center, and like they hide all these little line items in this $2.2 trillion giant bill. They could have just had a bill, which is what Thomas Massey wanted, where he said, "Look, why don't we separate the actual checks that are going to individuals who need a cash influx right now, right? Why don't we create that as a separate bill and then have your corporate bailouts and your CEO dirty money in a separate one?" They're like, nah, you go away. Even Trump
put it all together.
Trump was like, "This guy's the worst. He needs to get out of the Republican Party. Good luck in your re-election."
It's what's interesting to me. I have two questions for you. What is the libertarian response to the corona situation? Do you think the government should have taken as much action as they did, as much authoritative top-down control?
Well, no, never that much. What I do agree with is individuals exercising the correct actions as far as you should social distance. You should try and prevent too close interaction with people as this super infectious virus is going around. I think there are measures that you could take to, as you said, with Sweden, they took the most vulnerable people and exercised the most precaution with those specific individuals. Now, making it illegal for someone to go to work who's perfectly healthy, and by all accounts, if they do get sick, it's going to be fairly mild or just completely asymptomatic. Upwards to 50% of people who get this don't even know that they have it. They're just shedding the virus and they show no symptoms whatsoever. So they're completely making it illegal for individuals to go and work, and they're destroying livelihoods, and they're sending someone a $1,200 check that won't even cover rent for a majority of people.
What is that?
It is nothing.
We wrecked your life. Here's $1,200.
Exactly. And who's to know how many small businesses are going to be completely erased because of all of this? It's completely devastated lives already, and it's not even done yet. And we don't know the economic toll of all of these trillions being pumped in. Trump wants to do another $2 trillion for infrastructure. Like, this isn't the only bill that's going to pass for coronavirus relief. And these, so the libertarian response, I guess, to get back to your question, would be, no, the government's telling you, no one's allowed to tell you that it's illegal for you to go and put bread on your table. It's not that, no one has that job to tell you that it's illegal to go and work and provide for your family. I think you saw businesses like Publix. I have a Publix right behind my house. Publix, the free market, finds ways in a pandemic situation to kind of provide safety measures for its customers, because Publix wants customers. Publix wants people to come and shop at their store, but they understand that people want to take social distancing correct. And you're talking about Home Depot. They separate you in 6 feet increments. They make sure not too many people are in the store at the same time. Publix opens up at completely separate hours for seniors and those with medical needs. Those that are more vulnerable. So the free market finds ways to adapt to a pandemic type of situation because they still need to operate, but they understand the safety concerns that the public has. So there are efforts that you can make without complete government and control and sledgehammer efforts to try and fix something.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit sledgehammery, especially because, like Dan Crenshaw was saying, like Texas doesn't really have, they haven't really been hit by the virus. And so for them to be under the same protocols as San Francisco, New York, and New Orleans, places that have been hit, it's kind of silly. But everybody's kind of, in the absence of information, everyone just kind of panics. But that seems to be the MO of bad legislation.
Yes, never let a crisis go to waste. Never let a crisis go to waste.
Wasn't that Rahm Emanuel? Wasn't that Rahm Emanuel, Obama's guy?
I forget who that quote actually came from, but It's a great quote. It's the government never lets a crisis go to waste. They never do. They didn't in 9/11, and we still are feeling the effects of 9/11 and the government control that they took during that time, and we're going to feel the effects of the control that they've taken. We are not going to have there is no returning back to normal after this. There's no way. There's no returning back to normal after this. There will be some sense of normalcy where you'll be able to eventually go back to work, but there is no sense of normal. They've completely redrawn the lines of what the government is able to do during a time of crisis. They've completely shut down the entire economy, for one. That's never been done before, to take it to a grinding halt. And
do you think that we've survived things like this before, though, like the suspension of habeas corpus? And I mean, there's been some wild times where we've done some pretty crazy things and then been able to kind of come back. I mean, look at the policies and agendas of the 60s and 70s, and then you get the Reaganomics, goes all the way back. I mean, do you think, we have Edward Snowden, we have the NSA. Remember Obama was like, it's just metadata. And it's like, no, it's not. They're literally reading your emails and listening to your phone calls. Like it's not just metadata, but we get that. It takes us 10, 15, 20 years, but we kind of start getting it figured out to say like, hey, wait a minute. Like there's a VPN on my phone. The free market is able to say like, hey, do you want to not have your stuff be tracked? $100 a year. And it's like, okay, so there's things that you can do to kind of, for the free market to mitigate and push back against some of the sweeping stuff. I mean, yeah, we're seeing it right now, and the debt's going to be crippling, which kind of brings me to my second question, and that is, so Elizabeth Warren has basically like an eternal debt theory, that the idea is you can float debt indefinitely, and it's something that you trade and move around, but it's part of it. So this idea of, we're 20 trillion in debt, like, well, it could be 100 trillion, doesn't matter. And I'm like, I'm unfamiliar with this, right? Like that doesn't work. That doesn't work for me personally.
That's how it works with her 2-penny plan, right? It's only 2 pennies, and we can fund everything from everybody.
But the point that they had, or that they made, was this: that you're basically looking at, let's say China owes us, we owe China 10 trillion, and they call us on the debt. They want their 10 trillion, or they're not doing business with us anymore. And it's like, okay, or they're going to up their prices. And so now we can't, or we don't, the free market doesn't want to afford whatever they're making. Well, it collapses their own economy. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like at some point, debt it's just a figurative number. And I get it, they're real dollars, but at some level they're not. And so like I'm unfamiliar with it. I didn't know if that was a something that you were hip to, but somebody mentioned it the other day on a podcast, and I was like, wait, now what now? Like eternal debt theory.
I'm not entirely familiar with the eternal debt theory. I haven't. That's actually the first time I've heard of that. The thing I'm afraid of,
I could have made that term up.
The thing I'm afraid of is just the inflation numbers that are going to happen through all of this. Inflation's a very real thing. Hyperinflation is a very real thing. We've seen the results of that. I mean, look at Venezuela. We've seen the results of hyperinflation just recently. And so that's something that I'm most concerned about. As far as like, there is another thing where, yes, the free market can provide solutions for these kind of government overreaches into privacy. Like you said, you can get a VPN on your phone and stuff like that. But when you have these large corporate conglomerates like Google partnering with the U.S. government to give data, like there's articles that I've seen within the last 2 days about how Google is using Google and Facebook are using like tracking data, or they're proposed to use tracking data to cover like coronavirus spread. Like, are people obeying the self-quarantine?
Yeah, that was terrifying.
Yeah, are people obeying the quarantine? So like, what do you do there? There's really like, we're really not living in a free market. We're living in a crony capitalist corporatist system where the big tech companies have enormous leverage and enormous data over the people, and then government latches on to that like a leech, and they come together in this kind of fascistic system to where you have big government and big corporations owning control over the population and privacy. So you can have some sort of VPN system, but when everything is ate up by these large corporations and the American people or these corporations are protected by the government with regulations to eliminate competition and keep them at the top, it's a complete mess that we're in.
Yeah, I don't know. It gets so big. I don't disagree. It is
so
complex. It's so complex and big that you're like, geez, man. Like for the average person who just wants to, enjoy their life, it's overwhelming to be like, well, there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yes. Well, since to get into something in a little more bite size for us, let's move on to another topic that I definitely wanted to get your thoughts on. And that is that Bernie Sanders has suspended his presidential campaign and has officially endorsed Joe Biden on a live stream, nonetheless. So Joe Biden live stream, which I can only imagine how that live stream went with a man like that bumbling over his words. But let's take a listen to Bernie Sanders offering his endorsement to the establishment which he claimed he was fighting.
The clock is ticking. We don't have a moment to waste in combating the climate crisis. It's existential threat to us. In short, we need to build a fair, more inclusive, more resilient America. And with that in mind, I'd like to welcome to this conversation a leader who shares those values and has been an outspoken advocate for that vision for a long time. My friend, Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie, welcome.
Joe, thank you very much for your remarks, and thank you for welcoming me to your live stream here. As you've indicated, we are living in an unbelievably unprecedented moment. You and I were chatting a few months ago. Not in a million years would we have believed that we would be talking to each other in our respective homes, that we could not
talking each other through these magic television screens.
Get out of the house. We would not have believed that we'd be looking not only at a pandemic, which, as you indicated, has taken over 20,000 lives in our country, 500,000 people infected, but has cost us 16 million jobs. And that's probably a conservative number. The real number is probably higher than that. So we are in a terrible moment, an unprecedented moment. And I know we share the understanding that we've got to go forward right now and out of this in an unprecedented way to address the terrible pain that so many of our fellow Americans are feeling. So today I am asking all Americans, I'm asking every Democrat, I'm asking every independent, I'm asking a lot of Republicans to come together in this campaign to support your candidacy, which I endorse, to make certain that we defeat somebody who I believe, and I'm speaking just for myself now, is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
So there it is. Bernie Sanders offering his endorsement to Joe Biden, the giant Joe Biden, the monster that'll take down Trump. Who can't?
Is anybody surprised? It literally is anybody surprised anymore? Like, if it had been Elizabeth Warren after they were, did you call me a liar? I think you just called me a liar. And that's like, it's as soon as somebody gets it, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, nope, we're friends now.
Yep.
It's like, and that's the whole thing that makes everybody, I don't know. And that's one of the reasons I kind of like Trump. Was like, nah, dude doesn't like certain people and he likes other people, and that's who he is. He's not gonna
he's a fighter.
Pretend.
People like a fighter, and Bernie Sanders does not have a spine. He claims you cannot have a political revolution and not be able to call out your so-called political enemy. You can't.
I don't know. That's one of those things where, like, of course he did. He did the same thing he did in 2016.
Yeah, he endorsed the establishment that he claimed he was fighting.
Dude, the Bernie bros are livid.
Yeah, they are trashing him on Twitter right now. Actually, sorry Bernie is trending on Twitter right now, and it's just a bunch of people saying, "Sorry Bernie, I'm not voting for a potential rapist because of Joe Biden's recent rape allegations." as well as like, sorry, Joe, or sorry, Bernie, I'm not voting for Joe because he's the establishment that is the enemy, which that's correct. Yes, the Democratic and a Republican establishment are the enemies. That's like that's one thing that I admired about Bernie Sanders is I don't agree with his solutions, but he diagnoses a lot of real problems. That's one thing that Bernie Sanders is consistent with, is diagnosing real problems, but having terrible solutions to them. So that's one thing that I admired about Bernie. But what I don't admire is someone limp-wristed and jello-spined as Bernie Sanders to claim he's leading a political revolution against the establishment and the 1%, and meanwhile dropping out of the race and endorsing so-called establishment and 1%. It's completely corrupt.
My friend, Joe Biden. Like, oh, y'all are friends now?
Friends. Oh, that's nice. Didn't you rag on him for voting for the war in Iraq that killed millions of Iraqis? Like, make up your mind. What do you believe in?
Thought he was the enemy.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point, man, is that it's so confusing now that you don't really know what's real when it comes to all that stuff, if anything.
Right.
If any of it's real. It's like, of course he came out and was like, yeah, I endorse, like, yeah, well, that makes sense. I was going to ask you this. Like, and I don't want to get off the topic or change it, but did you throw money in the stock market when it went down?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
What were your favorite picks?
I bought some tech.
Why?
I bought some tech stocks, as well as some crypto. I bought some crypto.
Yeah.
I put some money in crypto, and then I'm gonna actually buy some more, like Microsoft or Apple. I don't know if the I was looking at I actually looked at this today. I was like curious about like how far the cruise line industry stocks had dove, and like they are at like garbage level, trash level entry prices right now. I'm like,
yeah, I'm in those.
Yeah, and I'm like,
I'm in those.
I might want to buy some of those. I don't know if they're gonna age well or if like I mean they've canceled. I know like Carnival has canceled all trips until like mid to end June, and they're under no sale orders, but I imagine that they're going to start, as people start to take vacations and travel more, they're going to continue to rise. So I'll probably get in some of that just to see.
I tried to think through, and I met with my financial advisor from Northwestern Mutual, and I was just like, what do you think is the biggest area for growth? And he was like, I've talked to a bunch of different people, and they were on a conference call with investors in the Southeast, and he was just saying that he's like, well, what do you think is going to be the biggest boom? And it's going to be, as soon as people are allowed to go out, it's going to be entertainment. Mm-hmm. It's going to be outings and entertainment. It's restaurants. It's going to be the restaurant chains that just got slammed right now, but that aren't going anywhere. Applebee's can board itself up for 6 months and eat it and then pop back up. They've got that kind of capital.
Like a nasty weed you can't get rid of.
Exactly, man. Those chicken fingers ain't going nowhere. And but those types of things, WME, I think it's World Media something, or I could be saying it wrong, but it's basically a media conglomerate. I didn't even know that they're the ones that manage Joe Rogan as well.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So all these, they're a conglomerate of like live shows, some casino stuff, I think. And so all of those venues that just got hammered. Mm-hmm. I was like, there was like 15 stocks to choose from, and I was like McDonald's is one. Mm-hmm. Like that's a good one. And McDonald's is always safe because they own their real estate. Mm-hmm. So like you're always going to be okay there. So they got slammed. You think McDonald's in a year isn't going to be right back where they were? So like for me, I was scrambling to get my hands on some cash to get it into the market because I'm like, look. When will you ever see a black swan event like this that is literally going to crash the economy 40% in 6 weeks?
That's true. Of course, I'm sure a lot of people in 2008 were saying the same thing.
Well, it's like, but so like Warren Buffett, they asked Warren Buffett, how much money did you lose in 2008? And he said $0. I didn't sell anything.
Yeah, right.
And I'm
like,
Yeah, if you don't have to sell, and it kind of comes down to this, and this is why you should listen to my podcast about with the money dude. Not all the listeners. I'm talking to Keaton specifically.
By the way, everyone should check out Bell House Chats, Matt's podcast.
It's mediocre at best. But the conversation with him, the thing that changed and you probably know this, but the thing that changed my thought pattern on investments was the difference between a stock versus a financial product. Like, what's the difference in a financial product versus buying stocks in the stock market? And once you kind of understand that I can buy stock, or I can buy $8,000 worth of shares in a financial product, and that financial product is made up of multiple shares. It's made up of, McDonald's, the cruise line. So you're not just in one. You don't have to pick a winner. You pick 15 different stocks or 15 different idea, that you like. So that helped me a lot being a younger dude. I'm only 35, being able to say like, okay, I'm kind of new to the market. The reality is this: do you think that you can leave that money in for 10 years? Can you live without it for 10 years? Like, of course. Can you live without it for 5 years? Of course. Do you think that the market is going to stay where it is for 10 years? It's like, no, we're going to boom at least at some point,
Yeah.
even if we have a 3-year lull. But the idea that you could get in, like this was almost, you know what it was? It was almost like had you bought stock before Trump became president.
Right.
Like when Obama was there at 19,000 and everyone was saying like, if Trump gets elected, like Mark Cuban, freaking idiot. He was like, if Trump gets elected, just Google Trump election, stock market crash. You'll literally get all these economists being like, if he's elected, the stock market is going to tank. And it's like, and a lot of people stayed out because they were terrified. But it was like, that would have been a good time to get in. But if you did not, holy crap, man, now's a really good mulligan. Like, hey, the opportunity to get back in at a lower price. And everybody always says like, what's the trick to the stock market? Like, oh, you sell high and buy low. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, when it's low, you got to go. Right. Like, you got to buy. You got to do it. And like,
That's right.
And everyone's like, oh, I don't know. And it's like, dude, it is down. Get in there. And so, I don't know. Me being a young dude, I'm like, if I lose my shirt,
Did
it
he
happens.
say anything about like gold or like precious metals or?
Yeah, I asked him about that. And he was saying that, and it was very brief, but it was basically along the lines of like, that's a thing that when you get old, he's like, the older you get, the more you want to rely on, you start diversifying out.
Safe money.
Right? Like, yes. And he was saying like, if you were 60 years old, he's like, what I would be telling you to do is to stay in right now into some industries like tech stocks and things like that until it rebounds, and then we'll phase you out. And so like one of the cool things about having an investor that helps in a time like this is for someone to say, hey, what's your window? Because my mom's window is very different than mine. Yeah. She has a very different window and has a lot more money than I do. And so for her, the financial plan to say, hey, let's get you in to some of these stocks we know that are like McDonald's. McDonald's ain't folding. Yeah. They're taking a beating right now. But you have a chance to legit make 20%, 25% on your money. And it's like, get your money in there. And then in 5 years, or let's say it booms right back. Let's say in a year and a half, they're right back where they were. Get out.
Yeah.
And then once you're in your once you're 60, then start getting into gold. And he was like, the only time I put young people really into precious metals is if they're nervous. He's like, if they really want secure money that it's not going to move. But he said, now's a terrible time to buy gold.
Really?
It's up because it's up.
Well, yeah, right.
It's up. It's like it's gold is expensive right now because it's secure. And he's like, so now's a terrible time to buy gold if you were trying to make money on it.
Right.
And so it depends on what your goals. And this is the thing that he just keeps telling me, like your time in the market. And he goes back to Warren Buffett. How much money did you lose in the 2008 stock crash? And he says, I didn't lose anything because I didn't sell anything. Mm-hmm. So like the worst people right now are the people that had money in the stock market that are losing their stuff and they're having to pull their money out of the stock market to make payments on things. They are getting absolutely crushed by people like me who are literally pulling money out of savings accounts
and putting it in
to go into the market. Like Are you in a bad situation? There's winners and losers in every market. And so if you have liquid right now, and like Shapiro said it, he was like, the real winners of this market are people 25 to 40 who have cash. He's like, because if you can get in and leave it for 5 or 10 years, of course you're going to make money.
Yeah.
And so for me, dude, I was looking, trying to sell my truck, pull the equity out of my house. Like I literally was thinking like, you're going to make at least 20-25% on this, if not 40. And so it just depends on, what financial product you buy and how long you're going to stay in. But man, I don't know. It just seemed like a mulligan to me. I got almost giddy to be like, it's down to 19. Like, yes, I'm in, And so like I sat down with Caleb, my Northwestern Mutual guy, and was like, hey man, here's the cash. He was like, I'm going to hold it for 4 more days because I want to see what's going to happen with this announcement or whatever. And he had 2 positive days in a row. And he was like, I think we found either the bottom or close to it. I don't think it's going to go much further than it has. I think it's reacted the way it's going to. And so like having that helps a ton because for me, I don't know. I don't know what to look for. He's able to meet with seasoned investors that are talking to people in New York that are like, hey, wait 2 more days. Like just hang tight just a second. On Monday, if it's up on Monday, we're going in. And so, there's financial controllers that are controlling $20 million of people's assets in there. Another cool thing I learned is this. I learned obviously about fiduciary responsibilities, and you can look that up if you don't know what that is. But just the idea that you have to do well for somebody else, you have to look out for their best interest. But it's the idea that you are buying into a controlled portfolio of people whose money is in that portfolio. For example, like I have to be invested in the things that I am recommending to you. Right. And so having somebody that is in it with you, that you're buying financial products, like I'm buying 15 tech companies. I'm not buying into Amazon. Yeah. I'm not riding the roller coaster. I'm riding a roller coaster, but it's less bumpy, and it all goes to your risk tolerance, And so my side hustle is putting $1,000 in TD Ameritrade and see what happens. That's the scary one. Yeah. that's the scary ones. I tell you, the most scared you'll ever be in your entire life is when you buy penny stocks. They're not even on the stock exchange. You got to go to the separate exchange for that. Yep. But you can buy into some like really crappy companies and lose everything really quickly.
Yes. Dude, when I first moved to Jacksonville and I didn't have a job, that's what I did to make money. I joined a trading group and they talked about penny stocks and like I made.
Dude, you can make some incredible. You can make some incredible money because they move. So like if you think about this, like what's a Berkshire stock at right now? $387,000 per share, something like that. I mean, it's literally like double my house, right? It's for a share. And then you have things like Bank of America. I don't know where it is now, but it was at like 19, I think, when I sold it 5-6 years ago, whenever. Anyways, the idea that of percentages, if Bank of America goes from 16 to 20, you make, or let's say 15 to 20, you make 20%, right? Like that's really good. But if you buy in at a penny stock and it's at 37 cents and it goes to 67 cents, you made a like 90 something percent, you know? And it's like, whoa, this is like, you can make crazy margins, but it also can go from 37 cents to 5 cents to zero.
Yeah, you got to be careful. I'm not recommending anybody get into penny stocks because that is littered with a bunch of just trash companies that are just there to like make money.
Oh yeah. It is a dirty thing.
Well, Matt Bell, I had a blast talking to you. I think we're going to wrap it up here. We just crossed over about a little over an hour, but it's always a blast talking to you. And thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of Freedom Strips. I will be more consistent. You will hear me more. I'm going to try and come out with an episode a week now. So you'll at least hear me consistently an episode a week. I'm going to try and make that my goal. Again, thank you to the We Are Libertarians Network. If you haven't listened to them, go over, give them a listen, give them a like on their Facebook page. Also, check out Bell House Chats, Matt Bell's podcast. Lots of interesting conversations going on there. We'll see y'all in the next episode. Peace.